an investigation into the efficacy of single and multisensory brain entrainment to achieve transcendent states for the purpose of therapeutic application. What a mouthful! Let's break this down. Can a transcendent state be useful for therapeutic applications such as PTSD, ADHD, depression, or any other mental states? Obviously, they're all different, but can it help any of them? Can brain entrainment lead to a transcendent state? And can stacking different types of brain entrainment make it more likely that we will get a transcendent state or even improve the transcendent state? Where did this idea come from? Well, I'm a lifelong explorer of out-of-body experiences, astral projection, lucid dreams, all kinds of weird and wonderful things that one can do with one's consciousness, as well as psychedelic experiences. I believe this came from the fact that I was very unhappy as a child and very dissociated a lot of the time, and I wanted to get out of my body. But now these skills in later life have become wonderful tools for the most incredible, magical and transcendent experiences. I suffered for nearly 30 years from a very extreme form of bipolar, where I would go from suicidal to a manic kind of euphoria every 3/4 of a day, so a day and a half for a full cycle. And I was looping around like this for so many years, never thinking that either end of the loop would come round again. I always thought that that was the absolute. Whenever I was up there, I thought it was everything. When I was down there, I thought it was over. But eventually, with the help of cognitive and analytical therapy, I was able to map this loop. And once I did that, I realized that if I could find a way of interrupting it, I might not follow on to the next step of the loop. So I discovered that I could do this with DMT. DMT is a psychedelic drug that sends you to another universe. It's about as full on of a psychedelic experience that you can have, and it lasts in its maximum intensity only about 5 minutes. So this was the perfect tool for me to just completely break my state, and this was the first step in healing this condition, which I am now well and truly over. So from that, I developed loop busting therapy, which is a way of doing this using other tools, brain entrainment being one of them, but also language to interrupt the neural patterns that someone might be stuck in so that we can create new ones. I'm also a music producer, a DJ, a sound designer. I work with immersive experiences to create as transcendent experience as possible for the audience. And I work with brain entrainment. I work with the Monroe Institute. Monroe Sound Science is their proprietary brain entrainment. And Roxiva, who are a flickering light type of entrainment. I am writing music for them at the moment and very much part of their wonderful team. So what is a transcendent state? Well, a transcendent state can be characterized by a few things. Ego loss, a loss of sense of self. Intimate connection to something greater than oneself. That could depend on what you believe in, cultural references, religious beliefs, etc. Profound presence, you feel completely in the moment, a loss of time. Desirable feelings, maybe awe, serenity, euphoria, but not necessarily. A transcendent experience can not always be pleasant. A shift in awareness and perception, so suddenly you're seeing things in a different way. And gaining insight, you may gain a revelation or insight about your life, which, can be very, very useful, as we'll see in the next slide. So how could a transcendent state be therapeutic? Well, there's a break in state. So if you're in a very negative place, suddenly you're experiencing something which is hopefully profoundly positive. This would also measure as a neurochemical change if you were able to see it. There's a loss of self-focus. So when someone's depressed or in any kind of loop, they're often very intensely focused on themselves. There's a feeling of connection to something greater. So that can stop loneliness. It can make you feel that you're not isolated and that there's something greater that you're part of. Life-changing insight can give new direction, new hope, new ideas. Shift in perspectives, new ways of understanding things. Your consciousness is expanded, so you see beyond your usual set of circumstances. And all of these things can lead to greater self-acceptance and greater resilience. How do you achieve a transcendent state? Well, sometimes they just happen spontaneously, and people talk about such things as Kundalini awakenings, mystical experiences, religious experiences. I have had one of these myself, so I can confirm that they are a thing when you're totally least expecting it and haven't done a single thing to make it happen. So who knows what that's about. Sometimes feelings of awe, if you listen to a beautiful piece of music, or you're seeing beautiful nature, or in a sacred building, may not lead to a transcendent experience, maybe just a feeling of awe, but sometimes it can do. Energy practices, meditation, out-of-body experiences, tantra, anything in a flow state, many different practices could potentially lead to a transcendent state. And target sensory brain entrainment, which is what we're talking about here. These are what some people might class as cyberdelic experiences, in that they can mimic psychedelic experience. And you can use AR, VR, and what I'm going to talk about is the Roxiva flickering light with my music, which was created for the purpose of transcendence, and Monroe Sound Science, which is brain entrainment to lead people into altered states. Brain entrainment is a way to shift the brain into desirable states depending on what you would like to do, like sleeping, creating, or going out of body. So brain waves are electrical activity across the brain, and they are rhythmic in nature. So we can use external rhythmic modulation to sync the brain waves to these patterns to encourage them into these states. And this is called frequency following response. Which brain states can we entrain? Well, any of them. We simply have to observe someone who is in the state that we wish to get to and observe their brain waves, and then we can reverse engineer from that and create modulating stimulus to encourage that particular state. Brain waves are tricky to interpret. So they are changing all the time. There are many of them all happening at once. And it's very much variable depending on what you're doing. So, for example, if you were to observe high delta, you might conclude that the person was sleeping. But as shown by Carl in a previous talk, last year when we were at the Giza pyramids, we took readings of our brains inside the King's Chamber, and we all showed very high delta, even though we were very awake, very excited, and in no way sleeping. Also, interference can very easily be picked up. Electrical interference, muscle movements. So it's not an exact science, and we're looking for generalizations. Quick slide just to show the different brain waves that may be dominant when you're doing different things. As you can see, they have both positive and negative effects depending on what you're doing. Recently, they discovered that when you're just dead, there's potential of high epsilon waves, but you can also hopefully have them when you're alive. So as you can see, the context is very, very important when considering brain waves. Here are some examples of brain entrainment. I've put rhythmic in brackets because brain entrainment should be rhythmic by nature. So we have modulating audio. This could be isochronic, that's sound, no sound, sound, no sound, binaural. Different frequencies to either ear. Phase modulation, the sound is moving. Monroe Sound Science uses 56 different types of modulation to create brain entrainment. Flickering light, talked about the Roxiva, Lucia light is another one. Visuals, geometric shapes that move in patterns such as the Syntropy app or the Mandelbrot Zoom. Tactile, this is when haptic feedback is synced to either the flickering light or the visuals to create a felt response. Self-produced rhythms, we can tune into our own heartbeat, our breathing, and even watch hypnagogic imagery as you're falling into a dream or coming out of a dream. Movement, eye movement, spinning, tapping, rocking, and dancing, of course. Electromagnetic, that's moving electromagnetic currents over the brain. It can be used on the body as well for other purposes. And brain to brain, this is mirror neurons. This is why they say that you are an accumulation of the 5 people you spend the most time with, so choose them carefully. So there are other factors that may enhance entrainment, such as burning essential oils like frankincense and bergamot may affect the nervous system. The geographical positioning of the brain entrainment. Are you doing it over water? We are water, so we feel a resonance with it. Over ley lines, this may or may not be true, but something to consider. Astrological positioning. Certainly, many builders of sacred buildings around the world felt that this was important. And these unusual brainwave readings that we read in these spaces would suggest that there may be some scientific evidence behind that. And finally, spatial and environmental. What you're seeing in these pictures is me with my hand on and inside the orb. The orb has been designed to optimize comfort in every way. So it has clean air, the temperature is controllable, the positioning that you're lying in, the fabric, the materials, everything has been considered to create the optimum pod for viewing media or meditating or anything that you might want to do in there. And I'm currently involved in a peer-reviewed study at a hospital in Jacksonville, where we have shipped out an orb, and in it there is my music with Monroe Sound Science, which has been created to give an energized, calm feeling. And on top of that, there is heart math technology to optimize heart variability and meditations from Soul Happy. So all these things have come together to see if we can give doctors the most optimum 5-minute rest so that they will come out energized and be able to perform perhaps 1 or 2 more surgeries or perform their day more effectively. And so it's a very exciting study. Although the orb is not a cheap piece of technology, if it could have these effects, it could save many, many lives. Brain entrainment can be subtle, like in the Mona Lisa. She hypnotizes you by oscillating your attention. If you focus only on her mouth, it looks like she's smiling with the little lines here. But if you look at her eyes only, it looks like she's sad. So your attention kind of oscillates between the two. Is she looking at you? Are you looking at her? If you move around, is she following you? Why is the water in the background on different levels? And it's more choppy at the top and less at the bottom, which doesn't really make sense, because if water was falling down, it would be more choppy. And there's so many other things in this picture: sacred geometry, golden ratios, many mysteries, our eyelashes, eyebrows, etc., all oscillating your attention and keeping us mesmerized by this picture. There is no greater form of brain entrainment that I know of than the Rave. So what you can see below are 2 pictures of me DJing. The one on the right, you have, of course, the music, the isochronic beat, sound on, sound off, rhythmic modulation. You get dopamine feedback as you know the rhythm and expect it to go a certain way. You have the flashing laser lights. Dancing, so the body is in training with movement. In the picture on the right, what you can't hear is that everyone was chanting, so you have the chanting as well. And above all, the brain-to-brain mirror neurons. There's nothing more exhilarating than a crowd of people doing something together. They're no longer single people, they've become one organism, the crowd. And of course, you've got all the supporting factors, such as the environment, if you're on any substances, smoke machines, any cultural references that might be adding extra layers to it, and the novelty and excitement of the whole thing. So in May this year, I went to do EEG experiments using my music, Monroe Sound Science and the Roxiva to see if we could see that whether stacking these things together was actually creating a more transcendent experience. And what we did was we listened first to my music, then my music with the tones, then my music with the tones and the Roxiva, and then finally doing that with a 5-minute meditation afterwards. And only one person was using the Roxiva at the time, so the other people were simply listening to what the person was listening to on the Roxiva. So this was very interesting. I'll come back to that later. So we were looking for particular patterns that could show that we were in some kind of transcendent state. Interestingly, the out-of-body experience pattern is a reduction of all the brain waves, which I think is fascinating. And then you've got the ultimate universal consciousness, which shows what it is like to be an enlightened state, or the evolved mind, also a very high level of consciousness. So we were looking for examples of this across our experiences. So what you can see here along the top are the different desirable mind states that you might be in, and the kind of average score of how often that appeared whilst we were doing the various different tasks, whether it be listening to the music or listening with the Roxiva, etc. So the conclusions. Stacking entrainment did indeed increase gamma, at least that's what we found. And gamma are the feelings of love, excitement, of higher level meditation. So certainly a very positive indication that we were closer or in more of a transcendent state. Mirror neurons are so powerful that when someone was enjoying the Roxiva, the other people's scores went up as well. So if you looked at their scores when just listening to the music compared to listening to the music while someone else was enjoying the Roxiva, all our scores went up. So that kind of makes it a little bit difficult to read what's going on exactly. Do we know that they're enjoying it, or are we just aligning? But either way, I think it's quite a beautiful finding. Testing consecutively has an accumulative effect, because as we were shown feedback of where and when our brains reach these transcendent moments, you start to anchor to them, and then you start to learn how to get yourself into that state, which is really exciting. Spending a few minutes meditating after brain entrainment moved the brain even further towards these desirable patterns. And in that meditation, nothing was happening. So we would have finished either listening to the music or the music and Roxiva, just 5 minutes of just pure meditation, and the brain is moving even further. And I think that's so important, because people just often stop the brain entrainment and that's the end of the experience. Really, that could be just the beginning of where you could go. Anecdotal data is valid and vital. So I wanted to really show everything with just brainwave data. But the truth is, we need to ask people what's happening and then compare that with what the brain data is showing. Because like I said before, there are many variables and lots of things to consider. So those two pieces of information are essential. We've only scratched the surface. And I've only scratched the surface of learning about the power of the brain. There's so much more to know, and it's a very, very exciting field, filled with mystery and adventure, and I look forward to delving deeper. My name's Caz Coronel. If you'd like to collaborate or be loop busted or need some music, please do get in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for listening.